The shelter notes said he didn't fit the household dynamic. They called him too quiet, too watchful, and too intense. They wanted a dog that played fetch, not one that spent all day mapping the exits. But our rehomed dog wasn't nervous. He was assessing. And the day he stopped being a pet and became a guardian was the day he threw his entire weight against our son at the top of the stairs. We almost scolded him for being aggressive until we saw what he saw, a wet, invisible spill on the top tread that would have sent our child into a free fall. The family that returned him wanted something easy. We realized we had something better. We had a protector who saw the danger before we even knew it existed. If you've ever underestimated an animal because of where they came from, stay with me. And if a dog has ever proven they were more than just a pet, tell me in the comments. This is why people subscribe here. I'll recount this carefully exactly as it happened. They called him Rehomed because it sounded kinder than returned. No abuse history, no warning labels. Just a note from the shelter that said he hadn't fit the household dynamic. Too quiet, too watchful, too intense for a family that wanted something easy. So he ended up here, a smaller house, a tired couple, one child who hadn't learned yet that some dogs don't play first. They assess. The dog didn't explore the house when he arrived. He didn't sniff corners or test furniture. He walked in, paused, and sat down near the hallway, watching. He's nervous, the mother said gently. The dog wasn't shaking. He'll warm up, the father added. The dog wasn't cold. He followed routines without being taught, stayed out of the way, ate when food appeared, slept lightly, always positioned where he could see both the child's room and the stairs. They thought he was still adjusting. They didn't realize he was mapping. The day he stopped being a pet started quietly, so quietly that no one noticed the shift until it was already happening. The shift happened in less than a second. The child's bedroom door clicked open behind him. The soft sound barely louder than a breath. He padded into the hallway in socks, rubbing sleep from his eyes, the way he did when he couldn't find his parents and didn't want to call out. The stairs waited at the end of the hall. Open, unblocked, dark. The dog rose. Not suddenly, not with noise. He stood the way a guard stands when the rules change. "Buddy," the mother murmured from the kitchen, distracted, rinsing a mug. "Stay." The dog didn't look back. The child took another step forward, foot sliding slightly on the hardwood. He wobbled, arms lifting instinctively, balance already compromised. The dog moved. He crossed the hallway in 2 long strides and placed his body sideways in front of the child, chest to knees, forcing the boy to stop short. Blocked. The child blinked, startled. "Hey," he whispered. "Move." The dog didn't move. He lowered his head, pressed gently into the child's legs, and leaned, just enough to shift the child backward by inches. The father glanced up from the table. "What's he doing?" The child tried to step around him. The dog pivoted and blocked again. Firm, silent. "No," the dog's posture said. The child frowned, confused more than upset. He reached out and pushed lightly at the dog's shoulder. That's when the mom did something no one expected. He barked. Once. Sharp. Close. The sound snapped through the house like a dropped plate. The mother turned, water still running. "What?" The father was already standing. "Hey, easy." The child startled at the bark and rocked backward, right toward the stair edge. The dog lunged. He didn't jump at the child. He slammed his body sideways, shoulder first, into the child's legs, knocking him back onto the carpeted hall runner. The child landed on his bottom with a small oof of surprise. Silence. Then, crying, the mother ran forward. "Oh my God!" The father scooped the child up. "Are you hurt? Are you—" The child clung to him, sobbing more from shock than pain. "The dog yelled at me." The dog stood rigid in the hallway, eyes locked on the stairs, chest heaving. The mother knelt. "He scared him," she said, half accusation, half relief. The father looked down the stairwell. Then he saw it. The top stair tread was slick, still damp from a spill earlier that morning. The light hadn't reached it yet. One wrong step and a small foot would have slid forward into empty space. His stomach dropped. The father's voice changed. He stopped him. The dog finally turned his head and looked at them. Not guilty, not anxious, certain. The mother followed the father's gaze to the stairs. Her hand flew to her mouth. He would have... She didn't finish. The child hiccuped against the father's shoulder. I was going to go down. The dog took one step forward, then stopped, as if reassessing. The mother reached out slowly. Good boy, she said, unsure, testing the words. The dog didn't wag. He sat, between the child and the stairs. The father set the child down on the couch and crouched in front of the dog. You didn't growl, he said quietly. You didn't snap. The dog watched him. You blocked him, the father continued. Then you warned. Then you knocked him back. The dog's ears flicked, sequence complete. The mother wiped her eyes. He's never barked before. The father nodded slowly, because nothing needed it. They stood there for a moment, the weight of the almost settling into the room. The dog stayed seated, unmoving, as if holding a line that only he could see. The mother broke the silence. They said he was too intense. The father looked at the dog again. They meant attentive. The child slid off the couch and toddled back toward the hallway, curiosity returning faster than fear. The dog stood instantly, blocked. The child stopped and looked up at him. Okay, he said softly and turned back around. The dog sat again. The mother laughed once, breathless and shaky. He listens to him. The father shook his head. No, he trusts him. The wish finally relaxed just a little, lowering his shoulders, breath evening out. The day moved on after that, but something fundamental had changed. The dog didn't follow the child. He positioned around him, and the stairs were never unguarded again. They spent the rest of the morning watching the dog, not in the obvious way, in the quiet, sideways way people watch something when they're not ready to admit what they've seen yet. The child recovered quickly. Tears dried, curiosity returned. He dragged his toy truck down the hallway and sat cross-legged near the stairs, rolling it back and forth along the carpet runner. The dog shifted. He didn't approach the child. He didn't interrupt the play. He simply stood and repositioned himself. One step closer to the stair edge, body angled just enough to block the open space. The mother noticed it first. He's doing it again. The father looked up from his phone. Doing what? She nodded toward the hallway. Standing there like a gate. The child leaned forward, pushing the truck toward the first step. The dog moved, one step sideways, blocked. The child frowned, then laughed and turned the truck around. He won't let me, he announced, like it was a game. The dog sat, still watching. The father exhaled slowly. He's not guarding the kid. The mother tilted her head. Then what is he guarding? The space, the father said. He's guarding the risk. As the day went on, they saw it everywhere. When the child climbed onto the couch, the dog lay at the far end, not touching, not hovering, but positioned so that if the child lost balance, the dog's body would be there first. When the child toddled toward the kitchen while the oven door was open, the dog stepped in front of him and refused to move until the door was closed. No barking, no panic, just placement. Good boy, the mother said again later, more confident this time. The dog acknowledged the praise with a glance, then returned to watching. That afternoon, the delivery driver knocked. The dog stood instantly and moved to stand between the front door and the child, who had run excitedly toward the sound. Stay, the father said. The dog stayed, but he didn't relax. The delivery was quick. The door closed. The dog returned to his position near the hallway, tension easing only when the child wandered away again. The mother sat at the table staring into her coffee. This isn't new, she said slowly. The father nodded. No, this is practiced. They thought back to the shelter notes. Too watchful, too intense. The dog wasn't adjusting to their house. He had been assessing it. That night, after the child was asleep, the couple sat on the couch in the dim light, the boy lying on the rug between them in the hallway. He never explored, the mother said. Not like other dogs. The father nodded. He mapped exits, lines of sight, hazards. They fell quiet. The dog lifted his head briefly when the child shifted in his sleep, then lay back down. You think this is why he was returned? The mother asked. The father didn't answer right away. If someone wanted a dog who plays fetch and naps through the day, yeah. The dog's ears flicked at the tone. But this, the father continued, watching him, this is work. The next morning confirmed it. The child woke early and slipped out of bed before either parent was fully awake. He padded down the hallway again, this time holding a book. The dog was already there. Not running, not startled, waiting. The child stopped short. "Hi," he whispered. The dog stood and blocked the hallway again. The child sat down cross-legged instead and opened his book. The dog sat too, guard duty maintained. When the parents arrived seconds later, breathless with fear they didn't yet understand, they found them sitting together on the floor. The mother laughed shakily. "You saved us another heart attack." The dog didn't respond. He was watching the stairs. By the end of the day, they stopped questioning it. They moved the child's toys away from risky areas, added a gate to the stairs, not because they didn't trust the dog, but because they finally trusted him enough to listen. That night, the father knelt beside the dog and rested a hand on his back. "You weren't waiting to be trained," he said quietly. "You were waiting to be believed." The dog leaned into the touch, just slightly. The pattern was clear now. This wasn't the day the dog learned how to protect a child. It was the day the family finally noticed he'd been doing it all along. The house grew quieter after that, not because the child made less noise, but because the parents stopped filling the space with assumptions. They didn't say he's probably fine anymore. They didn't say he'll be okay without checking first. They started watching the dog. Not hovering, not testing, listening. It happened that afternoon in a moment so ordinary it almost slipped past them. The child sat on the living room rug stacking wooden blocks. He hummed to himself, off-key and happy, focused on the simple work of making something tall enough to knock over again. The dog lay near the hallway entrance. Still, then he stood. The mother noticed immediately. "What is it?" The dog didn't bark. He didn't move toward the child. He just turned his head, slowly, toward the window at the back of the room. The father followed his gaze. The back door was ajar. Not wide open, just enough. A breeze pushed it gently against the frame. Tap, pause, tap. The child pushed his tower too hard. The blocks scattered and rolled across the floor, one skidding straight toward the open doorway. The child laughed and chased it. The dog moved. He intercepted the child with his body, not forcefully, not abruptly, just stepping into the path and lowering his head so the child bumped softly into his shoulder and stopped. Blocked. The child frowned. "Move!" The dog didn't. The father stood. "I didn't open that door." The mother crossed the room and closed it fully, clicking the lock into place. Only then did the dog step aside. The child retrieved his block and returned to the rug, interest already gone. The mother stared at the dog. "You saw that before we did." The dog lay back down. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched longer across the floor, the child climbed onto the couch beside his mother. He leaned back, giggling, shifting his weight the way toddlers do when they're testing balance without realizing it. The dog rose again. This time, he didn't block. He braced. He positioned himself directly behind the child, body aligned with the couch edge, so that if the child tipped backward, the first thing he'd hit would be fur, not floor. The mother noticed the pressure against her leg. "He's spotting him," she whispered. The father nodded, like a lifter. The dog stayed there until the child settled forward again. Then he lay down. That night, after the child was asleep, the parents sat at the table in silence longer than usual. "He's not reacting to emergencies," the mother said finally. The father nodded. "He's preventing them." They thought about the shelter paperwork again. Rehomed, too intense. The father shook his head slowly. They wanted a dog who fit into their life. The mother looked toward the hallway where the dog lay in his usual place. "This one fits around it." They watched him breathe, slow, steady, alert even in rest. "He's not guarding the kid," the mother said softly. The father finished the thought. "He's guarding the future version of him, the one who doesn't get hurt." The realization settled quietly. The next morning brought rain. the kind that slicked the porch steps and darkened the wood. The child ran toward the door, squealing at the sound. The dog beat him there. He stood at the threshold, planted, blocking access until the father grabbed a towel and dried the steps thoroughly. Only then did the dog step aside. Permission granted. The father knelt and pressed his forehead briefly against the dog's head. "You're not guessing," he murmured. "You're calculating." The dog exhaled. That afternoon, a neighbor stopped by to drop off something the family had forgotten at the store. She laughed when the boy placed himself squarely between her and the child. "He's protective," she said. The mother shook her head. "He's selective." The dog watched until the neighbor left. Then he relaxed. That night, as the parents lay in bed listening to the house settle, the mother spoke quietly into the dark. "He doesn't love like a pet." The father was silent for a moment. "No," he said finally. "He commits like a guardian." They both knew now. This wasn't a dog waiting to be trained. This wasn't a mommy learning boundaries. This was a wow who had been doing this work long before he arrived, and who had finally found a place where it mattered. And the truth was simple and heavy all at once. He hadn't been rehomed because he failed as a pet. He'd been returned because he refused to stop being something more. The moment that settled, it didn't arrive with noise. It arrived with routine. Late afternoon, the kind of hour where nothing dramatic is supposed to happen. The child played on the living room floor, while the mother folded laundry nearby. The father worked in the garage with the door halfway open, radio murmuring to itself. The dog lay in his usual place, between the hallway and the stairs, still. Then he stood. The mother felt it before she saw it. That quiet shift in the room, the way the air changes when something important decides to move. "What is it?" she asked softly. The dog didn't look at her. His eyes were locked on the child, not panicked, focused. The child had crawled toward the coffee table and pulled himself upright, fingers gripping the edge. He wobbled, laughed and took a step sideways. Toward the corner. The dog moved. Not fast, precise. He crossed the room and placed his body between the child and the table corner, angling himself so that if the child was by him, he would fall into fur instead of wood. The mother smiled faintly. "You've got him, huh?" The dog didn't relax. He shifted his weight. The child's foot slipped on the rug. It happened instantly. The child pitched forward, not hard, not dramatic, but enough that his forehead would have met the corner dead on. The dog lunged. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He slammed his shoulder into the child's side, knocking him off balance, just enough to change the fall. The child tumbled sideways instead, landing against the dog's chest and sliding down harmlessly onto the carpet. Silence. Then the child laughed. The mother's laundry hit the floor. "Oh my God," she whispered. The dog stood over the child, body rigid, eyes scanning for secondary danger. Table legs, nearby toys, anything else that might turn the moment into something worse. Clear. Only then did he relax. The father came running in from the garage. "What happened?" The mother couldn't speak right away. She knelt and pulled the child into her arms, checking his head, his hands, his knees. No blood, no bruise, nothing. "He would have hit the corner," she said finally, voice shaking. "Right here." The father looked at the table, then at the door. The priest sat, waiting. The father crouched slowly in front of him. "You saw it before it happened." The boy watched him. "You didn't react to the fall," the father said. "You prevented it." The dog leaned forward and rested his head briefly against the father's knee. The child toddled back toward them and hugged the dog clumsily around the neck. "Good dog," he said, mispronouncing it. The dog stayed still, accepted. That night, after the child was asleep, the parents sat together and on the couch, the dog stretched out between them. "He didn't hesitate," the mother said quietly. "Not even a second." The father nodded. He chose impact. They both knew what that meant. He had risked hurting the child or himself to stop something worse. Not instinct, judgment. They thought about all the moments that had led here. The stairs, the doors, the couch, the coffee table, the countless tiny corrections that never became emergencies. And now this. The mother ran her fingers through the dog's fur. "They said he didn't fit." The father looked at the sleeping child's room. then back at the dog. "He fits perfectly." The dog sighed, content. Later that night, the father added corner guards to the table, not because he didn't trust the dog, but because he trusted him enough to listen. The next morning, the dog resumed his place in the hallway, watching, not because he had to prove anything, but because this was who he was. The house changed after that, not in layout, in posture. The parents stopped reacting to the dog's movements with confusion and started responding with trust. When he shifted, they paused. When he positioned, they adjusted. When he blocked, they listened. It wasn't obedience, it was partnership. The child healed from nothing, no bruise to explain, no scare he could remember. He went back to stacking blocks and chasing light across the floor, unaware of the version of that afternoon that never happened. The dog stayed close, not hovering, not anxious, just present in the way someone is when they've accepted responsibility. Friends noticed first. "He's very serious," one of them said during a visit, watching as the dog quietly placed himself between the child and an open door. The mother smiled politely. "He's thorough." They stopped calling him the Rehomed dog. They called him by his name. That mattered. Weeks passed, then months. The child grew steadier on his feet, his falls becoming smaller, less dramatic. The dog adjusted too, less blocking, more spacing. He didn't interfere when risk dropped below a threshold. He wasn't afraid. He was calculating. One afternoon, the father watched from the doorway as the dog lay stretched across the hallway, eyes half closed. The child toddled past him without incident, and the dog didn't move. Clear. Later, when the child dragged a chair toward the counter, the dog stood instantly and nudged the chair away with his nose. Corrected. The father shook his head in disbelief. "You don't miss much, do you?" The dog didn't answer. He didn't need to. That night, after the child was asleep, the mother sat on the floor beside the dog and leaned against the couch. "I used to think a good dog was one that stayed out of the way," she said softly. The dog lifted his head and looked at her. "I didn't understand," she continued, voice tight. "You weren't being difficult." The dog's tail thumped once. "You were being careful." The father joined them, sitting cross-legged, resting a hand on the dog's back. "You didn't stop being a pet," he said quietly. "You just refused to only be one." The dog exhaled slowly, content. From that day on, no one tried to soften him, or distract him, or train the vigilance out of him. They made the house safer instead. Gates, mats, covers, routines. Because when someone shows you exactly where danger lives, you don't argue. You adapt. Years later, when the child was old enough to ask why the dog always sat in certain places, the mother told him gently, "Because he loves you enough to watch." The child nodded, accepting it without question. The dog aged with dignity. His movements slowed, his muzzle grayed, but his awareness never dulled. Even in rest, he knew where the child was, where the stairs were, where the risks had been, and which ones still mattered. On the day the child learned to ride a bike, the dog walked beside him the entire time, just far enough away to let him wobble, just close enough to stop a fall. When the child finally rode on his own, laughing, wind in his hair, the dog stopped and sat. Job adjusted. That night, the father stood in the hallway where it had all begun and looked down the stairs. "You chose us," he said quietly to the dog. The dog looked back at him. No hesitation. He had never been waiting to be adopted. He had been waiting to be needed. If this story stayed with you, if it changed how you think about the dog someone else gave up, subscribe so these quiet guardians don't go unseen. And tell me in the comments, would you have recognized him before the stairs did? They called him Rehomed, but the truth is he finally came home.